Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Craig Schwabe. I'm going to be talking to you today about a product that we've developed called the SA Shopping Malls and Trade Areas. I believe it's one of the most important data sets that we have developed. And to emphasize that the data that has been collected in this product is essential for optimized development, not only of South Africa, but the shopping industry in South Africa. It's of value to the property owners themselves, any developers in the country, as well as the many retail brands which utilize shopping centers in order to distribute their products and services. So I'm going to be talking to you today about this aspect of the work that we do. So just some interesting media coming out in the last couple of months in South Africa. One coming from Business Live in May of this year, indicating that the impact of COVID-19 has resulted in about a 4.4% decline in revenue in the shopping retail industry, with super regional malls declining by 9.3%, but neighborhood malls improving by 1.6%. And over the many years that we have been doing research in the retail sector, what we have tended to find, so this is not only during the COVID period, but even outside of that period, that it is generally the smaller types of shopping malls have done better than the super regional shopping centers. So as a consequence, one must ask the question, is this in the national interest that we continue to build these very, very large super regional and smaller regional shopping centers when it is the smaller formats of those shopping centers that have historically and even now under COVID conditions been doing better? Just yesterday, Daily Maverick had an article which again emphasized the fact that the lockdowns because of COVID-19 has impacted significantly on the industry, especially in terms of the number of foot counts and the trading densities. And as one will have seen, as one goes through the shopping centers, one will see that a number of them are closed because of these lockdowns, especially in particular sectors. But the tenants are under a lot of pressure, and this is being felt by the property owners as well. What we also know, because people are staying at home and working from home, is that the consumer shopping habits have changed. They're moving closer to shopping malls, closer to where they reside, rather than in the environment where they normally used to work. And again, the article emphasizes is that the bigger malls are feeling the pain, and the suggestion being is that they are oversized. But the question then becomes, are shopping malls dead? And the answer to that question is no. And the reason for that is that if you look at the shopping mall landscape across the whole of South Africa, we have got a significant number, over 1,900 shopping centers of different sizes, which have a significant investment with them. They are significant assets, and as a consequence, those assets will continue to have to be used in the existing form or possibly in a different form with different characteristics in terms of the retail mix being in those particular shopping centers. So the answer to a lot of these things are, yes, things have changed in terms of consumer patterns, but there is generally equilibrium, and it's because there's an equilibrium, we're going to go back to what was more of a normal, or the new normal as everybody's putting it, and the shopping centers will continue to be a critical part of the landscape of the retail sector in South Africa. So why is it important for us to have shopping mall data for the country? Well, shopping centers are a fundamental aspect of the economy and economic activity in our country. And I truly believe that if appropriately developed, it could be one of the mechanisms by which we can bring about an unlocking of employment opportunities across the country, from areas such as, for example, the rural towns to the urban centers to the metropolitan areas, and also in township areas as well. So it's a critical aspect of our socioeconomic makeup. It's been so for many decades already, and it provides an access to retail services and products that are required by consumers across the different provinces of our country, as well as in areas such as informal settlements, townships, and suburban areas. Now, what's very important is that a shopping center is an economic center of activity. And associated with that is the development of many subsidiary industries, which in themselves are employers of people. And they occur not only in the urban environments, but also in the rural towns. So there is real opportunity for the development of additional shopping centers of different types and sizes, not only in the metropolitan areas, but also in the rural towns as well. Now, the situation being is that when you start to have too many shopping malls in a particular area, shopping malls per se and the overlapping of their trade areas is not a negative thing. In fact, it creates economies of scale which allow for the growth of economic potential as well as real economic growth. But when there are too many, you get to a negative situation, and that is what we call cannibalization. And that is of some concern, and I'll be talking about that in my presentation to give you some ideas or some examples of where this is occurring. So in terms of economic geography, and some of the top economists internationally, people like Krugman, who got the Nobel Prize for economics on these sorts of aspects, he has emphasized, and many of the other academics globally have emphasized, that there should be a degree of regulation in terms of how the shopping center industry continues to develop. And we feel that our SA shopping malls and trade areas map viewers provide this data, which is imperative to understand the landscape and the full character of the industry in our country. So we are providing available to the country and to anybody who is interested a free map viewer. Now, why are we doing this? Well, we believe that all South Africans have a right to have a basic access to information, and knowing where all the different shopping centers are is a basic right that I believe that South Africans should have. So we're making it freely available on one of our web servers. But it's also what we are realizing is that in the different sectors of a business, there is very little understanding of the utilization of geospatial information. So by making the information freely available, it allows a broad spectrum of business people to get access to the information, to start to understand how to utilize this information in their decision making. What it also provides you with is something of the ability to look at where there may well be potential for other shopping malls to be developed. For example, in the townships of Gauteng, where you know that there is a high concentration of people, but also very importantly, and we've been utilizing this portal for this particular purpose, is that small, medium enterprises come to us and say, look, I'm a hairdresser as an example. I'm thinking of opening up a hairdresser in this mall, that mall, and that mall. By having access to this information, they can make more informed decisions about which of those particular shopping malls they should select. So it also provides a critical focus point on the sustainability and the optimal development of the shopping center industry in our country. Our commercial viewer adds another dimension to the shopping center dataset, and that is the trade areas of every single shopping center and demographic and socioeconomic information associated with those trade areas. And it allows the analysis not only of shopping centers themselves, but an analysis of the trade areas of those particular shopping centers. So the technology allows one to rapidly look for shopping centers across the whole of the country, and then also to search for shopping centers, whether it be at a local municipality level or a provincial level. What it also shows you very quickly, and that is reflected in the map, and I'll be showing you the information in a moment or so, is the extent of trade area overlap between one shopping mall of different sizes and types. So you're able to filter and analyze the data either at a shopping mall level or at a trade area level to get an understanding of the landscape in the country. It allows one to do a gap analysis, although the utilization of this technology simply in that fashion is not always the most effective. More sophisticated accessibility modeling methods should ideally be utilized, but again, it can be utilized for gap analysis. And having access to this information, one can then add additional demand-side information as well as supply-side information for a retailer or a property developer, as an example, to get a more detailed understanding of what's happening in the marketplace. And what is becoming more and more important in the South African context is to integrate information on consumer data, such as that coming out of the Marketing and Product Survey of the Market and Research Foundation, and also to create additional indices to get a much finer tuned understanding of the consumer and the shopping industry in South Africa. So I'm just going to go quickly across to show you what the web mapping viewer looks like. So with the web mapping viewer, one is able to very quickly do a search for a particular shopping center. For example, one can go and have a look at Menlyn Park as an example. So one is able to very quickly select Menlyn Shopping Centre if you've got an approximate understanding of the spelling of the mall, and one can apply that information, and one can immediately see that it has gone to the right area, which is in the Pretoria area. And I can then very quickly zoom in on that area to have a look at that particular shopping centre and its trade area. So that there is the trade area, and the shopping centre is situated here. So if one clicks on that particular shopping centre, it tells you the name, its classification, its GLA, the municipality that it is in, and who are the major key tenants of that particular shopping centre. Foot count information remains a problem, although it is there, and we will be adding that information systematically to the system as we go along. It also tells you who the property owner is of that mall, as well as the number of shops they have or stores they have in that particular mall. Now, one is also able to click on the trade area itself, and it gives you information associated with that. So you can see, for example, in this particular trade area, it's got a gross leasable size of 177,000 square meters and a population of just over 122,000, close to 123,000 people in that particular trade area. So one can also then start looking at the information, not only at a specific shopping mall level, but one can also look at it to see what the situation is with shopping malls in a particular province. So I've now just selected the whole of Gauteng, all shopping malls and their trade areas in the area associated with Gauteng. And that's the information there. So you can see the numbers of entities. There's 784 shopping centers of different types in the Gauteng area. In terms of their classification, you can see that there are 9 super regional shopping centers, there are 42 regional shopping centers, there's 69 small regional centers, 115 community neighborhood centers, and then convenience centers make up 39% of the shopping centers in the Gauteng area. So that provides you with detailed information. And once you've done your selection, and in this instance, I'm looking at the province of Gauteng, one can then also look at who the major property owners are. So, for example, if you look at the Brol Property Group, you can apply that classification, and you can immediately see information associated with the shopping centers that are owned by Brol, as well as in terms of the types of classification that they have. And one can then look at this information on the map, but one can also look at it in terms of the tabular information. So these are all the shopping centers that are owned by Brol, and one can then analyze that information in terms of things like, for example, the gross leasable area. So one can look at it from a point of view of who the property owners are. One can also look at it from a point of view of who the major key tenants are in that particular area. So let's say, for example, you're wanting to look at which shopping centers have ShopRite as a key tenant. And again, one is selected, and you can see that there are 15 shopping malls that have them as the key tenant, and one can then look at the tabular information. Now, the advantage of the technology is that it is simply enough for most people to be able to do quite sophisticated analysis of the information. So I'm going to just switch off the filter to select all the shopping centers for Gauteng, and then one can go to the second page, and it provides you with tabular information, pie charts associated with the trade areas, and it also provides you with information on the LSMs, the number of households that fall into LSM 10 grouping as an example. So if we were to do an analysis and say, I just want to have a look at those shopping centers which fall into the LSM grouping, which have the highest number of LSM households. So one can very quickly look at that, and one can immediately see that in terms of the Gauteng province, there is only one shopping centre that falls into the highest categorization of LSM 10 areas, and that is Centurion Malls. If LSM 10 was a critical aspect of where you would want to focus your retail outlet, as an example, Centurion Mall in Gauteng would be that entity. It also provides you with information of the age profile. It gives you information of the size of the total population. It occurs in the grouping of more than 227,000 people. And one can also have a look at the LSMs here. So you can see that there are 21,000 households that are occurring in LSM 10, and there are 22.9, slightly more households falling in LSM 9. So one can filter, dice and slice, segment the information to give you a thorough understanding of the shopping centre landscape across the country to allow you to make informed decisions about where you're wanting to locate your retail outlet. So moving on, I just want to then tell you a little bit more about the characteristics of the industry in South Africa. We have been able to map just over 1,900 of the shopping centers across the country, which have been verified and validated using secondary data sources. So we have got at the top of the list Gauteng with 787 shopping malls that have been mapped, then followed by the Western Cape. And as you can see, the Western Cape is more than half that of Gauteng, and this is primarily because the location of a shopping centre links in distinctly to the economic activity happening in those particular areas. And we have utilised the classification provided by the South African Council of Shopping Centres in order to do the classification of the shopping centres across the country. And they generally utilise three critical aspects: the gross leasable area, the number of stores that that shopping centre has, as well as the size of the land on which that shopping centre is located. So if you look at the different shopping centres, in terms of a super regional shopping centre, you'll see that the criteria that the South African Council of Shopping Centres utilises is that it generally has a square meterage of a greater than 100,000, and it generally has more than 250 stores. If it is a regional shopping centre, then it has between 50 and 100,000 metre squares in terms of GLA, and between 150 and 250 stores, and so it goes down on the different categorizations. So you can clearly see on the map here that the situation is that Gauteng can be clearly seen that you've got the largest number, with most of them being in the convenience centre environment and the neighbourhood centre, then followed by the Western Cape. And what's interesting about Gauteng, of course, is that it's got 9 super regional shopping centres. The next province with the highest number of shopping malls is the Western Cape. It only has 1. While in comparison to KwaZulu-Natal situation, you see that there are 2 super regional shopping centres in that area. Now, the accessibility of the province, the concentration of the people, all are factors which have an influence on the concentration of people, and I'll be discussing that a little bit more as we go along. So if one looks at the expanded classification of shopping centres, it includes value centres, it includes CBDs, it includes big box retailers, airport retail as an example. So one can access the information either utilising the smaller classification or the extended classification. And what one sees is that if you focus it from a point of view of the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, 80% of the shopping centres occur in the 2 groupings, and that is the convenience centres as well as the neighbour centres in Gauteng or in the country. So what we do know is that a shopping mall generally is located where there is core economic activity. And as a consequence, the location and the number of shopping centres should be in line with the economic potential of a particular province. What we must also emphasize is that at the end of the day, the development of shopping centres can also create new opportunity or new economic potential and bring about economic growth. And this is the work of Krugman, who I mentioned earlier was a Nobel laureate for his work on economics, and specifically in terms of new economic geography, where he says that at the end of the day, the development and the clustering of retail facilities and shopping centres in a particular area can create a cyclical situation which increases the economic potential and ultimately may increase the economic growth in that particular areas. Now, if you do a comparison of the percentage of shopping centres per province versus the percentage GDP per province, taking the national situation into consideration, what you see is that in terms of the percentage of shopping centres, Gauteng, and this is across the different classifications, Gauteng has 41.4%, but in terms of the GDP, it's got 33.9%. If one also looks at the Western Cape, it has 16.7% of all shopping centres in the country, and its GDP makes up 13.8% of the national situation. KwaZulu-Natal has 14.6% of the shopping centres, and it has a GDP of 15.9%. So the situation that you're seeing is that Gauteng, in essence, has 7.5% more malls than what the GDP of that particular area can cater for. The same situation with the Western Cape. There are more shopping centres by the extent of about 2.9% if one compares it to the GDP of that particular area. Now, all the other provinces have less shopping centres than what the GDP potential is of those provinces. So it shows you that there is opportunity for further development in the other 7 provinces in South Africa. Now, the other aspect to take into consideration is your ability to match your GDP or your economic activity in a province with the number of shopping malls that you have there is very dependent on the accessibility of the market. You have to have sufficient numbers of people with sufficient purchasing power within a reasonable distance in order for a shopping centre to be developed and the economic potential to be matched. Over the many years, we've heard about Gauteng being the province where there are too many shopping malls. And as these charts show, there is an oversubscription of around about 7.5%, we believe, in Gauteng. But the important thing to emphasize is that this is largely within the higher per capita income suburbs in the province. There still remains opportunity for the development of shopping centres in areas such as townships, as an example, and the smaller forms of the shopping centres to fill gaps within the suburban areas across the different provinces and in Gauteng. So the next question would be, well, how was this information developed? So we've been mapping centres since 2010, and the main reason why we've been doing that is that they are key attraction points in all of the 9 provinces in the country. What I mean by key attraction points is that there are many other retailers that want to either locate within a shopping centre or want to locate near a shopping centre because that's where there are lots of people being attracted. And the larger the shopping centre, the greater level of attraction, and as a consequence, the greater opportunity in the marketplace for other retailers. So we've been sourcing our data from the South African Council of Shopping Centres through their directory, which they publish on an irregular basis. We also utilize the Mall Guide, which is on the internet. And then we also go to Property Develop website to see what shopping malls they have. And in addition to that, what new shopping malls they are developing. We also do internet searches to look for shopping malls in the different towns and urban centres across the country. And then we utilize a gridding approach. We literally create a grid across the whole of South Africa. And then we utilize satellite imagery and we look at each of the different grids to make sure that we've got a shopping centre there or that there are shopping centres there. And if there are new shopping centres there, which you can quite easily pick up from the satellite imagery, which we are looking at, we are then able to map that information and collect appropriate attribute information. So once we've done that, we are then able to define the trade area of each of the different shopping centres. And we utilize the South African Council of Shopping Centres capacity parameters again to define the primary trade areas for the different shopping mall classifications. So a primary trade area is in essence where 60% of your customers come from. Now, the council also provides parameters of living standard measures as well as drive time. Now, what we find is that the utilization of the LSM doesn't always make sense. And the reason for this is that it is only once you've had the LSM's map that you can understand the concentration and the location of the different classes. And in some instances, it provides, by utilizing the LSMs, it provides nonsensical information. For example, super regional shopping centers all occur within the major metropolitan areas of our country. And the utilization of an LSM5, which is a rural LSM, primarily of small towns in the provinces, doesn't make sense because this is a metropolitan shopping center. Also, travel times, what we have found, and this is again why it is so important that we put this information into a spatial context, often results in too large an area being identified as the trade area of a shopping center, which doesn't make sense in terms of the reality of what that shopping center services. So we need to continue to look at mechanisms by which we develop the trade areas based on proper customer data. In other words, the people that on a regular basis, the 60%, the 80% of customers that regularly engage with a particular shopping center to be able to look at their trade area, and having that information, we can then determine the average travel time for that mall or malls within a particular classification in order to get that, so one can utilize both travel time and capacity of that mall in order for one to define the trade area. And what we generally find is that capacity of the mall, in other words, the ability of a mall to have sufficient market for it to be financially sustainable, is more important than the travel time. Right, looking at how we go about the defining of the mall trade area, in principle, we utilize a method called accessibility modeling. What accessibility modeling does is that it literally runs across the transport network of an area, taking into consideration the road speeds of the network, as well as the mode of transport that you are using in order to do that. And in most instances, whether you are in the suburban areas of South Africa, you utilize a car mostly to get access to a shopping mall. And if you are in townships, as an example, then you would predominantly utilize public transport, such as a taxi, in order to get access to a shopping mall. One then also looks at what we call the capacity threshold. In other words, how many people do you require in order for that shopping center to be financially viable? And in terms of the South African Council of Shopping Centers, they provide total population as that threshold. And then also looking at the distance range. And as I said, the distance range factors seem to be overemphasizing the size of the trade areas in South Africa. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that, and it is supported by many economists and theorists across the world, that defining the trade area and defining it accurately is a critical aspect of monitoring the shopping mall industry in our country, and particular availability of shopping centers. So if one has a look at the maps shown at the bottom there, you can see that this is the primary trade area of the Menlyn Park shopping mall. And what you can see is that the shape of the trade area is quite circular. And that is a very good indication, because what it indicates is that the mall is well positioned within its marketplace. In other words, people can travel a relatively short distance, and there are sufficient people in order for that particular shopping mall to be financially viable. One then takes into consideration, as the second map shows, the demand or capacity, and that is the primary mechanism that one utilizes in order to define the trade area. And accessibility is a critical aspect. So you'll see that there is a degree of north-south stretching of the trade area for Menlyn Park, and that is because you've got the N1 running very close to Menlyn, and as a consequence, you are able to access markets a little bit more to the south. For super regional shopping centers, we have generally utilized a value of around about 300,000 people being required in order for that shopping mall to exist. If it's a regional shopping center, then it's normally about 150,000 people. And if it's a small regional shopping center, then you need about 930,000. And these parameters are continually being updated in order for the shopping centers to exist. Right, so let's have a look at this aspect of cannibalization. Now, there are trade areas, and economic theory says that trade areas do overlap. So we accept that there will be a degree of overlap, and in fact, there can be a very positive aspect of an overlapping of one mall's trade area with another, because it creates economies of scale, and as a consequence, both entities benefit. But in many instances, there is so much shopping malls in one particular mall's trade area that there is significant overlap, and this brings about a negative situation, which is what we call cannibalization. Now, if one looks at the map on the bottom left there, you'll see that this is the trade areas of two super regional shopping centers, the first one being Centurion Mall and the other one being Menlyn Park shopping center. And as you can see, that there is a degree of overlap between the one and the other. So that area of overlap is equivalent to about 61 square kilometers. If you have a look at the Centurion Mall, it's a slightly larger area and covers 247 square kilometers, and the extent of the overlap for it is about 24.8%. While in comparison to Menlyn Park Shopping Centre, it is a smaller trade area of 178 square kilometers, but it has significantly more overlap on it of 34.5%. So when one sees that Menlyn Park shopping trade area has more of an overlap, one would anticipate that it would be more impacted by the overlapping of the trade areas than Centurion Mall, as an example. But because Menlyn Shopping Centre is so well positioned, in fact, it's one of the best positioned shopping malls in not only Gauteng, but the whole country. It generally is able to take the impact better than another mall where people are having to travel longer distance and is not as optimally located. So if you look at the Pretoria East situation, you find that there is one super regional shopping centre, and that is Menlyn Park Shopping Mall. You find that there are 5 regional malls within the trade area of Menlyn, and you find that there are 9 small regional shopping centers within that particular area. Now, a critical aspect of the development of the shopping mall industry is understanding that it has a spatial economy. In terms of economic geography, one recognizes that shopping malls occur in some form of hierarchy. Both retail centers as well as shopping centers occur in a hierarchy, which is what is reflected on the right-hand side. So what one sees is that you generally have an order 1 economic activity, for example, a super regional shopping center. And in those locations, there is often what we call economic clustering, or the agglomeration of retail facilities. Then you've got tier 2 and tier 3, where you've got different size shopping malls coming into play. Now, at each of these different levels, there are not only different sizes, but there are different types of shopping malls that form part of this hierarchy. At the highest level is what we call the central function, and it tends to be far more specialized in terms of the services and goods that are provided. And you've just got to think about Menlyn Shopping Mall as an example of the diversity of goods and services that is provided. As you come down the tiers of the hierarchy, one finds that the shopping centers change in terms of their functions, from being bulk shopping, specialized shopping, down to more day-to-day type shopping or top-up shopping as an example. Now, the clustering of malls, there is a value to it because it brings about economies of scale, and that brings about opportunity for economic growth in a particular areas. And what has been shown over many years of research is that the market of these different shopping malls, which form part of this hierarchy, has a hexagonal shape. And not only does it have a hexagonal shape, but it occurs in ratios of 1 to 3 to 6. In other words, you generally have a super regional shopping center or an economic hub. You then have at the second tier 3 smaller shopping centers, and then below that one has the ratios of 6 shopping centers in that particular level. Now, this is all defined by the capacity of the shopping center as well as the distance range associated with it. And generally speaking, what happens in a system like this is that there is an equilibrium. In other words, each of the different shopping centers of their different size, considering their location, are in a state of equilibrium. But when you've got too many entities coming into play, then you start to get the negative side of overlapping trade areas, and that is cannibalization. And that disrupts the equilibrium and places the situation in an unstable situation. So if we have a look at the Pretoria East market as an example, if one considers this principle, then it is not in a state of equilibrium. So it's got 2 more regional shopping centers that it should have, which is more than what is optimal. It's got 3 more small regional malls than it should have. So what you see happening then is that as new shopping malls come into play and it disrupts the market of another shopping mall, the other one then starts to change its GLA as an example, its retail mix, because it is trying to reestablish its market and stabilize itself. But as it continues to do that, all of the other shopping centers start to do the same thing. So you've got this continued situation that the shopping mall hierarchy is an unstable situation. And I don't believe that this is necessarily in the national interest. We need to ensure that there is a sustainable industry where everybody can benefit, not only from a point of view of property owners, but also the many people that are employed in the shopping industry in South Africa. So a question that is often posed is Gauteng overshopped? And the answer in Afrikaans is ja, nee, or in English, yes, no. So when we look at Gauteng, and I've said to you that it's probably oversubscribed by about 7.5% in terms of the number of shopping centers in Gauteng. Where it is oversubscribed is predominantly within the high per capita income areas, such as Pretoria East, as an example. But there are still opportunities, and if you have a look at the map on the left-hand side, you'll see where the major shopping centers are, the super regionals in red, the regionals in orange, and then in yellow you will see where the location of the smaller regional shopping centers. Overlaid with that is the hatched area, which is the different townships that occur within the whole of Gauteng. And as one can see, in terms of the townships, there may be 1 or 2, not all necessarily very large shopping centers. Many of them are on the smaller format of shopping centers. So there is definitely opportunity, because it is in these areas where you've got the highest concentration of people, with more and more than having the purchasing power, to go to a particular shopping center and within a reasonable distance. So there are clear opportunities in those areas, but not only that, even in the suburban areas, there remain to be gaps, and those gaps can be filled by the smaller form of the shopping centers. Now, one of the things that we've discovered in the research that we've done over the years is economic activity is being constrained by the availability of floor space. So if you are a retailer and you're looking at optimally locating your retail stores across a particular area, what you often find is that there is opportunity from an economic point of view, from a capacity point of view, and even within a reasonable distance. But there is not sufficient floor space for that particular retail facility to go into that area, whether it be a shopping mall of different types. So one of the opportunities that we see is for the development of shopping malls appropriately and sustainably in these different areas to bring about a sustainable and commercial shopping center industry in not only Gauteng, but all of the other 8 provinces of the country. So just some final insights from my side. Mapping provides a critical understanding of the spatial economy of the shopping malls and their trade areas in the country. Without this understanding, we are a little bit in the dark in terms of looking at its sustainability and its growth. The distribution of the shopping malls of different types and sizes, we have shown to be, in some instances, especially in provinces like the Gauteng and the Western Cape, are not necessarily optimum, although there is opportunity. And very importantly is that the development of new shopping centers provides an opportunity to stimulate economic growth, and very importantly, which is what we need in this country, is the creation of jobs. So there is really a positive aspect, but what is the other side of the coin is simply this, is that if you consider some of the things that I've been mentioning from an economic geography point of view, there needs to be a degree of regulation of the shopping center development in our area to ensure sustainability. And one of the few ways that you can do that is through the utilization of geospatial information and through the utilization of some of the web portals that we have developed and I have shown you.